So we have eminent speakers with us. So I welcome Mr. Srihari Kotni, Vice President, CISO, Pine Labs, who will be moderating this session. Yes. I welcome Mr. Gaurav, Assistant. I welcome Ms. Rama Devi, CISO, Hindustan Zinc Limited. I welcome Mr. Amit Sharma, Vice President and Head of Information Security, Info Edge India Limited. And I welcome Mr. Mridul Singh, Senior Sales Engineer, Rubrics. So over to the model. The PPT. Okay.
Good morning, everyone. Right, so not bad, but good crowd. So, eventually we may have more people joining, right? So, good morning, everyone. I would like to start with a very important trend in this panel discussion. So that is a kind of disclaimer, right? So disclaimer is like this, that the views expressed here are actually personal in nature, but we are going to use certain information that is publicly available, and also certain organizations which are in the public domain, like government organizations. So because anything discussed actually will stay within this room, so please allow us to openly express certain views. I first of all thank DSCA for giving this opportunity and to speak on a very interesting and very close to the work or my passion, right? That is decade of authentication and digitization possibilities and future of authentication. And we have a wonderful panel, very rightly arranged the panel here with a diversified industry experience and academic background, etc. Right? So just I would like to give a quick introduction about the panel here in my own words. One is Mrudul. He comes with decades of experience working in Rubric Technologies currently, which offers services in uh, observability and data protection solutions. And he comes with a vast experience of delivering solutions in the field of like data storage, etc. Right? Data storage, backup, vault solutions, etc. Right? So, and we have very interesting second panelist, that is Gaurav Vashni. Interesting, he is an IIT professor, IIT Jammu. Comes from vast research experience. He did his PhD in anti-phishing and anti-deception technologies, right? And also he has that postdoctoral experience in various universities and various research institutions. I have Rama Devi with me, who represents government organization, but not now. I mean, it's actually Vedanta now, right? It's private, but HZL, Hindustan Zinc Limited, is a mine, right? In fact, fortunately, I am also associated with Hindustan Zinc Limited in my early career, right? So I was supporting them, right? The type of employees she represents, actually, like a semi-skilled, they're skilled, but actually, semi-literate people, right? So she represents the world, which actually many of us, don't come across in our urban life, right? So she has been working in remote areas, etc., right? In the plants, in the mining areas, etc. And now we have Amit working for InfoEdge Solutions Limited, which is famously, right? Most of us are actually, use their e-commerce solutions like Naukri and 99 acres and dating websites, matrimonial. I think some of us actually must have registered our profiles, right? So, finally, myself, Srihari Kotni, I have over 2 decades of experience, but last 10 years I have been closely working in the consumer industry like telecom and gaming. At least for last 10 years, I have been into digital payments. I worked in Geo Money, Geo Payments Bank, and currently working in Pine Labs, and where the consumer entities or consumers' identities are, our services are actually secured, right? So just I would like to set some kind of context. I have made some couple of slides, typically depicting about how the actually authentication has evolved in last 10 years or so. I kept actually in mind that the fintech industry, where it is actually sum of all problems, and it represents a different variety of population in India, right? So just if you can start the slides, please. It's slightly little bit fun actually, so don't take it just to set the context actually, right? So मैं यहाँ भी चलाऊँ क्या? Shall I come over here and run it? So just click.
Robert, do I owe you money?
Lee, my friend, care to open up for an old colleague?
Of course.
Thank you.
First, test of honor. 3 questions.
Fire away.
Your first. Shall I serve coffee or tea?
Tea, of course.
Excellent. Second, milk or lemon?
That would depend on the tea.
Correct. And now the third and most grave of inquiries. In which year did a Harvard scholar outgrow an Oxford man at Henry?
Surely such a travesty has never occurred.
Your heart is true.
Shall not pass!
So the last question actually reminds me about authentication and some of the problems that it says 18 plus 7. Sorry. The last question actually reminds me that some of the websites actually talks about you have to give an answer 18 plus 7 or 12 plus right. So right, so this I think you have seen, I think one of the first authentication that is compromised, right? Sesame Open, so the Alibaba and 40 thieves, right? I think if today's Sesame Open, I think probably it will be like this, right? So how it is changing? Actually, earlier we used to have some 8 characters password, and we used to carry the tokens, right? I think first HSBC has introduced the token. Actually, if you have multiple, I mean, if you are in a place like Hong Kong and all, like you will be carrying multiple, your office token, your bank's tokens, right, etc. And you used to have biometric, right, in the offices, etc., to capture the attendance, right? So it has changed. It has changed with a simple PIN, right? Not only the mobile apps today, some of the applications are also using PIN now instead of password. Then the product teams argue that what is the difference, right? And now it is changed with the OTP. So OTP, everyone knows that actually, we have seen the OTP flaws since the introduction of the OTP, right? But still, this is the most popular and most easier to implement. And today biometric, actually we call biometric on the phone, but actually the phone on the biometric is not a true biometric, right? True biometrics are something like how the offices have implemented, and how the Aadhaar actually has implemented it. So some of the organization actually ask for 14 characters password, right? And typically my product team actually says that, why do you need to keep this date of birth? Look, if you look at the consumer organization like payments, etc., you have millions of customers. At least 50% of the date of births are incorrect. This is 1/1/1980 is the date of birth, the standard date of birth for most of the people, right? And this kind of people ask them what is mother's maiden name. In fact, I didn't know actually what is mother's maiden name for last around 10 years back. Then I went to dictionary, I realized that it was my mother's surname is actually mother's maiden name, right? And password, how many people actually, today many people knew password, but actually still many people do not understand what the password is, right? So typically, before starting this session, you have to question yourself, I mean, like, how many IDs you have to remember, right? So when you give an ID, actually it will say that this ID is already taken, right? And how many passwords you have to remember, because many organizations do not accept the password complexity of other organizations, right? You have seen, that means you have to remember more number of passwords. And there is a history actually, some people say, some organization says that you cannot keep the last 14 passwords of history, right? And how safe is your password? Are you sure that the password is going securely in the system? And is authentication is always needed? For example, I come from Visakhapatnam, and there is a drainage leakage there. To actually report a complaint about the drainage leakage, and there is a massive authentication. First factor authentication, second factor authentication, date of birth, mother's maiden name, and the 18 plus 7 equal to what, right? What's not, right? Do we really need the authentication? Are we abusing the authentication? So this is the context which I want to set up for this, and we have a wonderful panel here. So you just actually, you can I switch off this? Right. So just want to start this discussion, starting with Mrudul here. Mrudul, you have been, in the data protection industry, right, over the decade, and you have seen, I think ultimately, the data resides, you are actually developing, you are in the solutions, service, delivery, where the data is finally residing, and right. So what do you see actually that, the trend actually are over the period of last 10 years, how this authentication has evolved in your view? Actually, what are the challenges and how it has been evolving, right? So,
sure. First of all, good morning, everyone, and thank you for giving the privilege to be here. And coming back to how authentication has been changing. In fact, if we look at as a human, authentication is something as old as the human existence is, because from the time we are on earth, we have been trying to authenticate each other in one way or the other, and that was a way to build trust and to communicate and to take things ahead. But when digital era started, we don't have a physical connect, we don't have a physical contact, and we know somebody basis their digital presence. And if it is only through maybe some IP address or some username or some password, then authenticating somebody becomes really challenging. And in the early era, we started with passwords, and we all know that if you go back in history, 1960s when the password was first introduced, and around after a year, it was compromised. So from then onwards, there has been continuous effort and investment and research going on to how can we better authenticate. Because once you authenticate, it also takes to the next level of authorization. Because without authentication, if you authorize something, that also is opening a lot of doors. So today, if you look at past 10 years, what we have seen changing, MFA is something which is becoming more and more predominant. People are adopting multi-factor authentication. But even in MFA, can just having one MFA is good enough? That is also something which is now not becoming sufficient, because we have seen OTPs getting compromised. Anything which is coming over email can be compromised. So there is a continuous shift towards having an evolving authentication mechanism, but at the same time, it also is around zero trust. So when we talk about authentication, it has also to be with zero trust along with authorization at a micro-segment level wherein you authenticate somebody to do something only to that extent and then it becomes nullified. So next time when they have to do the same thing, they have to again authenticate and authorize. So this is something which I've been seeing changing, and with the increasing value of data, it's becoming more and more important that we evolve on this. That is what I see.
Right. Thank you, Amit. So that actually, rightly summarizes that how the authentication and authorization is actually, evolving, and how we are learning from different compromises, and how we are actually further strengthening this process. So very interestingly, actually, I want to ask a question to Rama, that as you have seen, actually, you are dealing with the uh, the consumer entities, or the not the consumer entities, basically your employees, right? Who may not be digital savvy people, right? Who may not be educated. Uh, how do you actually I mean, not just 10 years, probably you can go back to some 20 years also, right? So how you are actually seeing that? I think in my view, before the literate people started the authentication, I think illiterate people are actually, that particular population in the mines started using the authentication, or authentication has been implemented for that population, that type of employees, right? So, we interestingly, so just I want to ask Rama that how you are seeing for last 20 years that how these different authentication technologies have been implemented or applied on the running of business, right, in your view.
Thank you, Srihari, for giving this opportunity to express myself about how our organization evolved in this authentication process. Okay, so first of all, I would like to wish all of you good morning. Sorry. In this journey of authentication in our organization, as it is a mining and metal organization, okay, so we have many mines scattered all across the pan India, not only India, then across abroad also. So, but what is the process which we go? Okay, so there are a lot of contract employees we have. Okay, so other than the employees, on-roll people. So over here, on-roll people are having some sort of like initially we have got the card system. Okay, so there was only cards were given to us, and later on for the contractors, the contractor used to have a register which they used to maintain that how many employees their contract employees have come, and they used to mark that P. Okay, if you remember the P for presence and all this. Okay, so after this, for few years it went, and later on, if I talk about the mines, so it is very important for us to know how many employees have gone underground. Okay, so this is, we have both open cast mine and underground mines. Okay, so it is very, very important that if any unhappening had happened, so we need to know how many people are there at that point of time inside the mine, right? So for that sake, in the olden days, they used to have token systems. Okay, so the contractors or the mine managers used to provide a tokenization, like hard tokens they used to have, and they used to provide to all the employees or the contractor labor who are going inside. Okay, again they used to come out and they used to submit that. So this was the process, a very old process. Now as it has evolved and we have learned so many things, like biometrics have come, proximity cards, and all these are being taken care. So currently what we have is that there is a punching machines. Okay, so we punch the biometrics of that person who is going underground. Okay, at what time he is going and when is he coming back. So the whole thing is tracked through the punching machines and this application which is behind this. So this is how we are getting this authentication mechanism in the mines.
So the tracking based on the authentication has started much before the Google started tracking, right? So, right. So that's very interesting. So actually, just want to come back, come to Gaurav, right? There's an academic angle, right? Uh, so I'm very impressed with, when he talked about his research, right? How his research in the anti-deception technologies and anti-phishing, etc. Right? So Gaurav, for others' benefit, just I want to ask you that, what your research, right, in these areas told you about actually, what is your observation or what is your inference that the challenges that industry is, that not seeing, but actually it is an imminent thing, right? The challenges or the issues with the current authentication methods deployed by industry for consumers or for the employees, right? Wherever the authentication is there, right? So what is the, the challenges with this current authentication method and what can go wrong?
So thank you very much. I think I'll start with the tracking thing. We are being tracked here as well. So if you see, you have a tag which is given to you. So this tag is basically a UHF, ultra high frequency tag. So when you move through that specific door, this is my assumption, there's a UHF reader there. So when you move, that UHF reader blinks. So it basically records that who moved out of the door and who came inside. So that's how we are tracked, and that's how authentication works. So if we start with the authentication, I mean, when we didn't had any kind of ID cards, digital identity, it's basically a face which helps people identify you. So this means that if the identity is very strong, you do not need verification. Right? You do not need verification if your identity is very strong. The problem in digital world is that the identity is not strong. So basically, when you are in front of me, I can actually see you and I can say that you are X or Y. But when you are behind the computer, I cannot say who are you. And that is a very important part of authentication, because I don't know who you are. That's why I need identification as well as verification. I need both the things. I need to know what is a password. Just the email ID doesn't work, because I don't know. Email ID can be with anyone. So the digital world changes that landscape, that in the physical world, we may not need a verification as such, though we also need verification because there can be two people who have done some kind of face masking and they are in front of you. But in the digital world, because we cannot actually verify, we need some kind of authentication factor. And there are various authentication factors that various people use. We use passwords. Someone says that I'll use RSA key. Someone will use something else. There are different factors. And with every factor, what we try to do in the internet is that we try to increase the trust. So we try to increase the trust. So when you say multiple factors, you try to increase your trust. As far you go in the internet, for example, if you cannot verify someone, you will increase the number of factors. And the total research of authentication is about how you can actually develop strong factors or identify strong factors which can actually help you validate an identity or verify an identity. I'll give you an example of PUF, physically unclonable functions. What we are trying to do, we are trying to find out some characteristics of the silicon chip so that I can create a device fingerprint and I can create a strong identity. So if I can create a strong identity, I do not need verification. Though I may need verification, that's an additional factor. When we were doing the research in anti-phishing, anti-deception, we identified that you tell us what factor and we'll be able to spoof it. So for example, if you say that there's an OTP, I have developed myself so many phishing solutions, phishing attacks, which can actually sniff an OTP, maybe through different mechanisms, and then actually can re-enter it, and then you can maybe breach a two-factor authentication that is based on OTPs. WhatsApp web, you can actually break WhatsApp web as well, 30 seconds time, 1 minute time. I mean, that's very important that 30 seconds is not because you want to actually change the dynamic code, it's because that can be reflected back. So if you take a QR of WhatsApp, if you can successfully get someone scan that QR, you can get that specific person's identity on your WhatsApp web. So basically the time is the factor which is helping you decrease the chances of attacks. So you have a set of factors. All factors, we believe that they can be spoofed or they can be actually taken and used by an attacker. And that's why we try to build strong factors. And that is one of the main area of research which is going on. Also, one thing that I want to highlight is that authentication is not well studied. So if you see, we just come up, we find out, okay, this is one of the authentication solution, let's use it. But there are three factors which are very important in the use of an authentication solution. That is, what is the security you're trying to achieve? What is the deployability that you're looking for? And what is the usability aspect of your specific customer? If these three things are studied well, we'll be able to develop a solution that can actually solve your problem of authentication. So we are doing a lot of research with respect to how authentication can solve novel problems. For example, how to achieve authentication when you're standing at a border in the border line, right, in a border area, and someone says that prove your identity. Now you have an Aadhaar card, but you cannot prove that identity because you need an internet to identify whether this Aadhaar card is right or wrong. Can I actually create an identity which can be verified offline? This is one of the research that we are doing, that how to verify offline identities nicely. A lot of things that can happen through certificates. We have still not explored PKI very well in India. So there's a lot of potential in that as well. So all these things are area of research for people who are working in authentication. Device-to-device authentication, again, hardware authentication. For example, you're using device IDs or device hardware addresses as a part of authentication. How strong these identities are. Can we spoof those identities? With the innovations in which we are changing the hardware addresses of Bluetooth low energy devices, can we use them as the identification factor or the verification factor? We cannot use them. So what we will use then to verify a device? So once you move to software and then verify hardware, you're not doing it right. You have to verify hardware itself. So what we can do there, it's again an area of research for researchers who are working in this area.
So wonderful. I think, Dr. Gaurav, I think you rightly touch the crux of authentication, that an authentication has to identify a person who you are, right? And if the password does it do this? No, it can't, right? So, so the authentication method that is being chosen is actually typically based on the convenience and based on the business model, etc. But we can't really call it authentication, right? So industry and not only the industry, actually so in the digital world there's a continuous research, and how they are evolving is actually that based on the requirement, where you are, what service you are doing. So that authentication has to reasonably identify that who that person is, right? So so just I want to connect with Amit, that he is in this e-commerce industry, right? Then typically I asked him that which authentication, right, is like how the consumer authentication, because he deals with, his organization deals with a lot of sensitive data, right? It can be personal profiles, or it can be health records, right? It can be confidential information where the privacy is at most important for the consumers, right? So I asked him that, how the consumer identities and authentications actually impact this. Then typically his response is that whose authentication is important? Is the employee authentication is critical, or consumer authentication? So just, I wanted, let Amit only explain this phenomena better, right? Over to you, Amit.
Right. Good morning, everyone. So in our e-commerce industry, we are dealing with the recruitment data of the customer, as well as in the matrimony commerce, which is Jeevan Sathi, and property, which is 99-acre real estate. Shiksha is the educational part of the organization. So these are multiple data segments which are being taken care for the business orientation. So what we have seen is that the consumer needs the easiness as well as security or the accessibility of his data during his orientation and using the basics of the accessibility, so that all the data which is required for the evaluation will be there for the customer. For that ease of use, we have taken the initial segments of the authentications. So those are the normal categories initially from the later days, which are normal username passwords. But later on we have put it, when it comes to the Android and iOS device, we also put the easiness on the number of days of login not required for the customer, so that whenever he open its application, for example, if you open your Naukri.com application on mobile, it will not ask you every time for the authentication. It will tag your device category and ID with the segment of user and authorize the access through that particular device. This is one way we manage the authentication on the device for user, keeping in the mind that the user get the easiness of accessibility. Second thought is from the customer side, we also maintain the scrutiny on where we can emphasize the second factor authentication, which is through the mobile OTP, which we have given to the customer that if they want to opt it, they can use it. It's not been forced as of now, because some customers do not want mobile OTP every time. So these are the two ways for the customers. For internal usage of managing the data privacy and confidentiality within the organization for the customers, we use multi-phase of authentication, which consists of the zero trust, multi-factor, as well as the critical authentication management system within the organization. This is to ensure that the customer data is being secure and tightly mapped with the right set of people. Those are required to access those for the business purpose, not with everybody. So these are the multiple segments we taken care, and we are moving towards the more form of evaluating the authentication methodology through our engineering teams, those who are doing R&D on these accessibility criteria, to make it more effective and secure to the industry users. So we are still working on multiple solutions to make it far better on this.
Yeah. Thank you, Amit. So just a quick question to at Murudul, that how you are seeing the the changing trends in the authentication in your experience, and what is that actually you see that in next 5 years, that what are the different changes you want to bring in, right, in this the way the employees and the customers actually do their authentication, like what are the solutions you would like to implement? How do you see the changes?
Right. So one thing which I think we all can very well relate with what Gaurav mentioned about is, while authentication is important and we have been working towards creating strong authentication mechanisms, but having a strong identity brings in a lot more security and ease of user experience, or it improves the user experience in addition to having the authentication. For instance, say if we remember some 20 years back or 15 years back, when we were traveling, we are required to print out our air tickets as well as our ID proofs, and then it has to be validated by somebody at the security gate, and you have to continuously prove that okay, you are traveling and you have valid travel documents and valid identity. But when we look at today, you can go with the new Digitization initiative. What it is doing, it has just brought in our identity and used it as an authentication at the airport, and now we can just walk into the airport, you know where you are, which gate you are allowed to go and access, and you can just board the flight without any documentation. So that is where what I see is that while the industry is working and will continue to work towards bringing more and more strong authentication mechanism, but for user experience it is going to be more and more transparent. It is going to be based on the identity of the user, and more stronger identity we create, it is going to be more seamless experience for all of us.
Yeah, thank you, Mrudal. So I want to connect with Dr. Gaurav that, he has rightly summarized that what is the right authentication and what factors decides that, to choose the right authentication. So I would like to request Dr. Gaurav that what are the research happening in the fields of authentication? What are the technological advancements you see that will actually transform, the user experience are actually, and also, help the industry that to secure actually, so basically today also we have errors, incidents, etc. So what is the advancement actually which will reduce the incidents at the same time improve the user experience?
Yes, so I think that there should be a lot of manpower investment in vulnerabilities research in the authentication scenario. So even in our research environment, we also do a lot of understanding of what are the vulnerabilities which are present in an authentication scheme. Then once you understand that, you'll be able to develop more strong factors. What we have identified in our research is that if you try to bring all factors to one place, for example, if you try to give all the factors to the user and let the user decide authentication, most of the times user will fall for phishing or will fall for social engineering and will give all the factors. So you are done and that person will be hacked. So it's very important that how you distribute factors across multiple platforms. So as you said that on the device you keep something. What you'll be keeping might be a session token. That session token travels over the TLS and it does the authentication. So some of the factors can be on the device, some of the factors can be with the user, some of the factors can be environment specific. But all those should be in a usable way, which does not make the user. So for the user, it should be a black box. So user should not see that there are multiple factors, but there are multiple factors. So this is one of the things that is very important to be done, like how we can actually create such factors which user never sees, but they are there and they are being used as a part of authentication. For example, BLE smartwatches. So everyone, if the person is actually wearing BLE smartwatch, can we store some kind of a secret in the service characteristics and descriptor and then use it whenever the user tries to log in, and this can be one of the factors. Or there are smart bulbs in the home. Can we put something in the smart bulb? Though just not the only factor, one of the factor which can play a role in environmental conditions of logging in. Second very important thing is that if you see the authentication landscape, like UIDI is doing something, then NPCI is also doing something for digital payments. There are organizations which are doing something. What we see is that authentication is going to play a very important role. I mean, this is something that is more than what we see. On internet, there is just one thing that is making sure that user uses that specific suffix, and that is that he is able to prove the identity. And authentication is not, if you're solving a problem in authentication, not just solving it for logging in or for login, you're solving a very bigger problem. So if I can create a solution for authentication, I can use it in visitor management. I can use it in digitization, for example, doing digital payments. I can use it in, for example, FASTag, in cards, for example. So one authentication solution can be used across various platforms, various services. And people might not have thought in that direction, that how we can actually create solutions that can be used across various platforms. So for example, in Singapore or in other places, if you see, like, there's one card and then that card can be used across various places, and the same authentication token works across various places. Though there are problems as well because it is centralized, but at the same time, for low value transactions, it can be used. The third thing is that how we can create strong identities, as we discussed, that how strong identities can be created. So verification load decreases down to a level, because you don't need to put a lot of efforts in factors that the user remembers or are there. The identity itself is very strong to be used for authentication. So these are some of the areas which I think people should work on, and I think hardware authentication seems to be a very interesting topic to me. So for example, if you can create device fingerprints in Android devices, in devices that we use, and that itself provides a strong identity a factor, then we can actually reduce the load in authentication systems which are used. And one more thing which I want to add is that sometimes we feel that using OTP is one of the way to do authentication. I see Myntra, I see a lot of companies which does that because it's very usable. Like you just get an OTP and you just log in. But that not only creates the problem with respect to hacking of a user's account, it also creates a bigger problem which people are identifying, which are bombing attacks, SMS bombing attacks, which are possible through such platforms. And so authentication solutions not only affect the account of the user, it actually affects the community at large. So it's very important that the right solution is chosen now.
So Gaurav, your response actually opened up more questions actually than, so some of the things actually that, what I can, connect somewhere that can customer bring in his own authentication instead of actually, the organizations, say that, you register and authenticate, right? As I, say that, look, I have a digital certificate, use this digital certificate for authentication instead of me, instead of organization telling that, look, you enter your OTP or, authentication, etc., right? That is one thing.
In that same line of context, recently you have heard about that in Middle East, the authentication of at airport, they do not require your boarding pass now. You can go and you will get by face authentication, you will get enter everywhere. So that is the new step which is coming up, where the physical orientation will get you validated and there is no additional authentication will be required as a paperwork. So yeah.
So as we were discussing with respect to that application that we show, so when we started, I said that we didn't understood authentication well, because if you see banks used to say that, okay, you bring your passbook, and when we see your passbook, then only we will actually give you the money, right? So it's a physical copy of that passbook. So once COVID came in, they identified that it can be moved online, identities can be moved online, and we can trust the identity. So the whole problem of authentication was trust. And they thought that the trust is on that passbook. That passbook seems to be more trusted. But then when COVID came in, they identified the trust can actually shift to online. So we can trust this as well. So the authentication actually is not well understood. Even if you see in banking sector, now they're actually moving a lot towards online and digitization. So I think it's the complete idea of authentication is on trust. If you can build trust at any place, you can trust that authentication factor. Whether it is a physical copy of the passbook or an online copy of that, you have to just increase the trust on that factor.
They have put the barcodes so that anybody who do not have that barcode on the passbook will not able to authenticate for the detailing of the account.
So digital banking has been an exclusive thing we started with, with the tokens and all, there was a cost being incurred, but it opened actually gates to everyone. With the digital banking, we actually reduce the complexity or downgrade the authentication. Today, actually, the whole authentication, it boils down to the phone number, right, to which the OTP will come.
Yes.
Right. So Ramadevi, actually, I just, because of lack of time, I want to conclude faster. So how the advancements in this various, because as a consumer, right, I mean, the industry that you are consuming, the advancements in the authentication, how it is changing your employees' productivity or, their experience, etc. Right? Can you just touch upon quickly, you have 2 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, in this world of authentications, we do have evolved very nicely that we have now being using this biometric accesses for all of our employees, okay, from the way back systems of fingerprint, these all things, okay. So in this biometric authentications, we are very keen in not allowing the false positives, okay. So there are two types of things which we are very effectively look into this, like FAR, that is false accept rate, and FRR, that is false reject rate, okay. So we need to have a balance between these two parameters in order to have a central effective rate. Okay. So FAR is that false acceptable rate is that you are accepting a person who is not authenticated. Okay. So he is not supposed to enter inside. And like the contrary, you have FRR, that is false reject rate, unauthorized person not accepting. Okay, so we need to have a balance. So here we have to bring in that the sensitivity of the devices needs to be adjusted as per the acceptable levels, right? So this is very important, and all these figures should be maintained at a lower value so that a effective authentication mechanism will work in the industry, right? So for this we need to enroll, the enrollment should be very perfect. Okay, so as per the enrollment process of biometric, if I talk, so they have to have a proper sensors to sense your fingers. Okay, but here I can tell you that one of the scenarios which we are facing in the challenges. Okay, so if a person working in our chemical industry, like in our smelters, who are having this, who work continuously in a chemical, so that their fingers are not properly, their fingers are they're worn out. Okay, so the identification through the fingers is not proper. So at that time we bring in the facial recognition. So through the facial recognitions we authenticate or give them the special privileges to get into the authentication process. So this is how, yeah, we can
So,
take it.
Ramadevi, touching upon something that your authentication failure, your password locking may actually, put you for some 5 minutes or for one day, actually, accessing some critical services like banking, etc. But she is actually touching upon situation that it will be livelihood for the temporary and some of the permanent workers, and whose life will depend on their authentication, right? So what if a factory worker, works for some 500, 600 rupees a day or 1000 rupees a day, his fingerprint doesn't work, right? So that is actually the sensitivity, there's a lot of sensitivity actually in, the areas that authentication is playing a role, right, in the organization. So Ramadevi is touching upon, it's very wonderful insights. So we have only 1 minute, so just before asking some questions from the audience, it will be very useful if you can ask some question. Just quickly, want to cover some 30 seconds. So this is the future trends actually which I collected from internet. Something very interesting that there are two types of, there is a certain authentication research is happening which will become very implicit. So that means customer will not be asked for entering a password or the OTP. It's just based on his behavior, right? I'm surprised that, someone says that, okay, type your PIN, right? You type the PIN. So even the password is actually, the PIN is leaked out, right? There is a difference between how you enter the PIN and all. So, but I have a lot of questions that, the authenticity of this kind of authentication, but in the demonstration, it was shown that it works great, right? I tried various, methods, various ways, but actually it works many times. And one organization claims that based on the geolocation and the pattern on which actually the person travels, right? Based on that, they do authentication. That surprised me, that because, how can a person can be controlled the way he is actually walking, driving, etc. But these guys have shown that the better authentication rate and less failure rate through this geolocation. These are very interesting factors. And also, Amit, you have touched upon in the airport, as the person walks in, what he see on the board is actually that the flight details or the boarding gate details, etc. Right? Only visible to him, right? So very interesting things are happening in this authentication, which makes the authentication less painful, more efficient, and towards the protecting consumers' rights and customers' privacy and data, right, and the national interest, right, at the end, right? So just in case you have any questions, our panel would like to answer within our knowledge, right?
Good discussion. People have been talking about device trust for a while, but the device trust based authentication as one of the factor. Not much of uptake in the enterprise. People use SMS, OTP, but device trust in terms of laptop, CPU ID, whatever, Mac, whatever, right? Only few specialist vendors offer it. I mean, now few vendors offer it, but not much of adoption in the enterprises. Is there any privacy related issues or whatever? Maybe you can panel can throw some highlight some perspectives there.
I would request Amit to, because he's touched upon, but yeah, it's a very interesting question. So Amit.
So this is not related something to privacy. This is more related to the authentication of the identity of the person who is accessing that information. So with respect to that, it's contain, for example, which I have shared, that there is authentication through your mobile device itself, which will not ask you the authentication again whenever you access your information or you are applying for anything on the application. So going further, there are a lot of things which are going to happen in the industry with respect to authentication, and device-based authentication will always be a primary object because it contained as a secondary factor also, and it also have the similarity which supports to the secure authentication for the end user as well as the end device. So it's securing your device, it's validating your identity, it's giving you secure access and easiness of accessibility, which overall journey of the customer centric information will get very fast as well as secure manner. So this is something which will be part of the activity always.
So if I add upon this, so basically the device authentication is a add-on authentication. Like after the primary authentication, the act of repetition actually is avoided using the device authentication. However, with the risk-based authentication, in case there is a compromise of device happens, the stolen device, etc., we can add actually layer of the risk-based authentication which will detect that there is an unusual pattern, right? So Gaurav, you can.
So I think there are two questions that why we are not seeing it. So the reason is that the research is still going on, and we will see it in the coming years. The second question is that whether there are privacy concerns. Yes, there are some privacy concerns. So if you see the BLE, Bluetooth Low Energy, or the Bluetooth, there used to be a very strong adapter hardware address, which was there earlier in time. So it never changes when you actually use the device. Now there is random MAC addressing in mobile phones as well. And this contradicts the use of BLE because we wanted to use that in our research also. We wanted to use that as an identity because that identity is a strong identity. But Android allowed that to be changed, randomized. Reason lies in the fact is that when you move your smartwatch across this room, and let's suppose there is an RF BLE sniffer kind of a device, kind of a software in your mobile device, you can actually sniff that hardware address. So if I can actually put something like this UHF across this whole lila ambience, I can see a specific hardware address moving from which room to which room. So I don't need any permission for that, right? So with the specific hardware address only, I can see where you're moving, I can track you down. And that's the main reason why randomized MAC addressing was allowed for Bluetooth low energy devices, because you wear them as smartwatches, you take them as mobile phones. So definitely when you actually go in device fingerprinting, it definitely plays a role in hampering the privacy of the user as well.
So we can take more questions actually, because we have to close this session. It's 6 minutes late. It's a wonderful audience. Thank you very much for asking the questions. And yeah, I mean, it's a wonderful composition of I thank all my co-panelists and also DSA for the opportunity given. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much.